Hey, this is a video response, I guess, in response to a video Piro made called Overpopulationeer. And in that video, Piro asserts that people who think that overpopulation of the human species right now is the preeminent problem of our age are, I guess, just wrong, misguided. So, and I should say that I'm one of these people that think that the human population on this finite world right now is the preeminent problem of our time, and that it looks grim for the planet's survival. Now, first off, I got to take care of one little point. Anything I say here, this is try to kick the ball down the road. It's not for any kind of tit-to-tat discussion, in part because I haven't watched all of Piro's videos, and I've only read some of the discussion threads. And the reason that is not that I don't want to or that I find it not interesting, is I just don't have time. And I've been on the road, I've been working a lot. So, but I think it's an important discussion to further. So that's out of the way. First off, Piro said, I think, that people who believe that overpopulation of the human species is of humanity is a liberal viewpoint, and that's just not true. People who think that overpopulation or human population should be constrained at the current levels and even go back a little ways, that's a very conservative notion, Piro. And that you're saying that it's a liberal notion is actually acceding to people like the free marketers and such, who, and the conservative movement that we see in the world, in the U.S. today, that have co-opted that word to kind of give validity that the system that they're trying to perpetuate is the same as it ever was. So, I mean, I just don't accept it in the strictest sense. So, but that's neither here nor there, or a different video. I think we can break up the overpopulation issue into two sides. One is an objective component, and one is a subjective component. And the objective component, I think we can say, someone like me, and I think a lot of data that's been generated, can say that any kind of, that the ecological malfunctions that we see in the biosphere today, that those are ultimately caused by a burgeoning human population that continues to foster a culture of consumption. And so if we look at the three big components, or the three major environmental problems that I see in my view, and I've said these before, the first is the collapse of the ocean ecosystem. The second is climate change due to the release of terrestrial carbon into the atmosphere, and the third would be the mass extinction that is going on of species in real time. And fourth, for me, on a personal note, I really despise urban sprawl. So those three, all those problems, whether you want to break them up, you know, because we burn carbon and all that, ultimately the problem is that it's driven by the incredible increase in human population. So any kind of increase in efficiencies that we get from technology is just offset by the creation of a new consumer, which is a human being. And so you're just on this uphill spiral. And this other way, collapse is coming this way, you know, the pollution or climate change is coming this way, and at some point it's just going to fall off that edge. And, you know, I mean, the most clear example of this is oil consumption, where, you know, we are much more efficient with our use of oil nowadays, but we still consume more of it because there's more people. You know, oil consumption isn't decreasing in the world. In spite of our wonderful cleverness and everything else, it keeps going up because the amount of people in the world keep going up, and to be able to have a car is a desirable thing. And I think, you know, what I mean by objective, I think you could put a marker here. I think you could say, you know, when the world starts, we see a dieback of the population of, say, 10 to 5% of the world's population over a 10-year period, we can say, hey, look it, this is really going on, and it is caused by just too many people. And I think you've seen that on small scales. I mean, I think China went in, what, 1950s? Late 1950s, they had the Great Famine that killed 50 million people, which is probably 10 to 5% of China's population at the time. And I know you're probably saying, oh, it was mismanagement. But no, I mean, you know, technology is at a certain level. Just couldn't take care of it anymore. And so someone like me, you know, with the increase of human population, that at some point we will see a grand dieback because of whether it's through famine, disease, or war, which is more the subjective component. Let's get right into the subjective component. That's more about your crowding issue, right? Hey, you're in my space and it really bothers me. And I guess that's pretty subjective. But I mean, I think it has real consequences. And I'll give you just throw two examples out there. Let's talk about the Rwanda genocide. Everything I've read about the Rwanda genocide, the Hutus and the Tutsis, essentially the same people, descended from the same people, with the same ancestors. But, you know, one wears purple and one wears green. And that's, eventually they get so bowed up and so crowded that they go after each other's throat. No, and so it killed, what, 1 million people? And you know, I've read, and I don't know if it's true, I find it interesting. So you had humans going after each other. I've read that dieback probably bought the mountain gorillas an extra 20 or 30 years before extinction. Because you know, that's the other thing I should say here. I don't see any difference between the industrialized and less industrialized world. In a country like Rwanda, what you have is you have an upward cultivation into the mountains that have never been farmed before because of the burgeoning populations. And so you get these species just forced farther up the hill to the point where they just vanish. And that's just the way it is. So anyway, but back to subjective things. So that's one subjective component, crowding. It has real effects, and I'll give you the one that I'm familiar with. One side of my family homesteaded in the west coast of America back in the 19th century. And I'm sure for them, when they came to America, along with the waves of other immigrants at that time, that it was such a liberating and a freeing experience compared to, you know, stodgy and classified Europe. I mean, they had freedom of opportunity that they never had back in Europe. But for the Native American culture that was here, I mean, it must have been, you know, a stoic desperation, because you know, all these people just keep flooding in using this technology that, while I'm sure the Native Americans understood, had no desire to use. You know, they wanted to continue to live their lives the way they had lived them, their forefathers had lived them. And so, you know, I like to think that Native American culture has been assimilated in large part into the United States culture. But, you know, that moment they were overwhelmed by the Europeans' greater numbers and greater technology. And it essentially kind of meant, you know, the creation of Native American culture as a relic and no longer a major player in world affairs. And I think that's sad. So I got to wrap this up, Piero. You seem to have this unshakable belief in technology, and I don't know why that is. I mean, and man's cleverness. I mean, what we know now is that the world's a finite place. We've been everywhere. Go to Google Earth. You can look anywhere. If you paid somebody enough money, you certainly could be any place in the world within 6 months. But in most places, you could be there within 72, 80, 84 hours. And so it's a very finite world now. And we know that as our numbers increase, that we are increasing the stress in the biosphere. And any kind of increase in efficiency has not shown to be any kind of large payoff that you seem to insist that we can do. There is no free lunch. John Galt does not have a perpetual motion machine. Anyway, later.